Welcome to Global Eye, where it's not just what you need to know, but what you want to know. I'm Ellie Hochenberg, and together we're going to take a wider and deeper look into the world we live in. So let's see what we have on tonight's show. New York City is now a big red apple, but is it one small step for Mamdani, one giant leap for Mamdanism? Great minds think alike. How about all minds think alike? A new research suggests we all essentially share a brain, or at least goggles. Ever wondered what's your bot's favorite tune? It's most likely Drake. We'll explain why. And the word of the year is not even a word. What on planet Earth does 6'7" mean? Warning, it's going to make you feel old, but at least we're going to feel old together. So before we get to all of this and so much more, we are eyeing the globe's biggest stories. Congratulations, Congress. Your government shutdown just hit 40, and some records really aren't worth celebrating. While senators burned through their weekend in Washington playing their favorite game of chicken, while flights get disrupted, federal workers miss paychecks, and millions of Americans watch their insurance premiums prepare to double.
We voted, the Republicans have voted 14 times to open up the country, and the Democrats have voted 14 times to hurt the country, really. They should approve it, but they might not. If the filibuster is not terminated, then we will be in a slog with the Democrats, and very little for either party will be done. So it's a good thing.
Some moderate Democrats are flirting with a deal to reopen now and maybe, possibly, perhaps vote on health care later. But with Trump digging in and House Speaker Mike Johnson offering all the commitment of a bad Tinder date, that promised vote is pure fantasy. Day 40 and counting, because why stop now when you're on such a roll, right? Turning the B into a T. What could go wrong? Tesla shareholders had just approved a pay package that could make Elon Musk the world's first trillionaire, because $473 billion just doesn't hit the same anymore. Musk's pitch: forget those pesky sales and profit drops. Tesla's real future is humanoid robots. Never mind, these miracle bots aren't actually for sale yet. Betting $1 trillion on Elon's fever dream? Well, if the robot does Elaine from Seinfeld dance moves, honestly, that's reason enough. Europe plays the world's highest stakes game of guess who, I guess. Brussels airport went dark after drones forced a shutdown, stranding 3,000 passengers. Yes, drones are now buzzing military bases and civilian airports across Europe, costing airlines a fortune and rewriting security playbooks. Yet all European officials can offer is finger pointing and speculation. Mother Russia. But here's the problem: zero proof. Moscow's actually behind it. Our kids, our rules. Denmark just announced it's banning social media for anyone under 15. And unlike other countries tiptoeing around enforcement, they're not messing around.
It's an agreement with 14 points about how to protect minors better online. We're standing in a situation in Denmark where far too many young people, far too many children are having a profile on a big social media platform. Our clear recommendation to the parents is please don't have your children on these social media platforms before the age of 15.
Well, like surprise, TikTok's already sweet-talking about their 50 preset safety features, but Sage and Denmark aren't buying it. Translation: big tech had its chance and Copenhagen's done waiting. Where can they ban it for grown-ups too? We might all benefit. Well, nature is trying to tell us something. Not sure we're listening. Super Typhoon Fungguang making landfall in the Philippines. At least 2 people were killed and over 1 million forced to evacuate as it batters eastern and central regions with strong winds. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. has declared a state of emergency as authorities race to prevent further casualties, while the Country is still reeling from the devastation of Typhoon Tino earlier this week, which killed over 200 people. Winds of unwanted change. Well, did you call to say congratulations? Because Rodrigo Paz is Bolivia's new president, sworn in after beating former President Jorge Tuto Quirigua. His victory ends nearly 2 decades of a one-party rule. And as always, it's the economy's Tuto.
God bless us. Let's work for the people's hope and move our country forward. Enough of government stagnation. We will work for every family, every father, every mother, every child. These decisions are not easy. We will be honest and transparent, guided by truth, by God, by family, and by our homeland.
Well, Paz inherits a shattered economy, which he vowed to fix. Now the easy part, right? Turn an election promise into reality. How hard can it be? Asked every person ever assuming office. Well, good luck, of course. It's election season in Iraq, but before the chaos of Tuesday's parliamentary vote begins, the country's security personnel and displaced people are already casting their ballots today. The special early vote is running smoothly so far, but what is missing? That's right, allegations of corruption and disqualified candidates and general voter fatigue. Hello, 41% turnout back in 2021. Well, some are already predicting another uninspiring election cycle because throw in the boycott from influential Shia cleric Muqtada al-Sadr, and it's clear this election is just as messy as the last one. But hey, at least they're voting on time. Progress, right? How strong is a leader who can't tolerate 2 activists challenging his rule? Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni, who's clinging to power for a 7th term, just caved to international pressure and released 2 Kenyan activists after they were held in military detention.
38 days of abduction was not easy. We didn't think we were going to come out alive because we were being abducted by the military. We have been kept by the military in Uganda for this under the Special Forces Command. We're going to release more details to you in a short while after we get some medical attention. We've not been eating for about 14 days myself. I've been fasting. It's been very difficult, but thank you so much for your solidarity.
Well, as the activists released signals, cracks in Museveni's iron-fisted regime is warning to anyone opposing his rule, it will end badly. He's likely right. It often, if not always, does. Just not sure for who. And have you met Dozing Don already? Because the self-proclaimed no-sleep president was caught snoozing again, this time during a White House event on, wait for it, sleep and obesity and weight loss drugs. Yeah, Trump, who once mocked Biden to be Sleepy Joe, now seems to be earning his own version. Well, maybe he was trying to lead by example, right? Session on sleep. All right, don't go to sleep because now we have reached the summit. And joining us tonight from New York City, Brendan Straka, founder of the Walkaway campaign, and Democratic strategist Nate Lerner here in our studios, our very own Owen Altman. Thank you all so very much for joining us tonight, because it is clear New York City is a big red apple, but is it one small step for Mamdani and a giant leap for Mamdanism, so to speak? Let's take a look and we'll take it from there.
The people of New York have spoken. Zohran Mamdani will be the 111th mayor of New York. From the Democratic Socialist wing of his party, he has promised sweeping reforms to public services, including fare-free buses, free childcare, and city-owned grocery stores. Supporters have praised his plans, saying it will benefit working-class people. But criticism has risen over the cost of these proposals, whilst Mamdani has come under fire for refusing to condemn slogans used by his supporters that some deem anti-Semitic. But is this a storm in a teacup, or should Jewish New Yorkers be worried? Could Mamdani's policies revitalise New York, or is it a step in the wrong direction? Could Mamdani be a thorn in the side of New York-born Donald Trump, or is he a perfect scapegoat for the president? How will Zohran Mamdani change New York City?
All right, gentlemen, as always, we begin with our quick fire rounds, 30 seconds each to lay out your initial stance on the topic, and we'll take the debate from there. So will New York City change Zoran Mamdani, or will Zoran Mamdani change New York City? Brendan Straka, take the lead.
Well, I'll start by saying that, I think most people feel that Zoran Mamdani's proposed policies are not very realistic. And I think the question right now becomes how many of the things that he's promised New Yorkers, from free buses to rent freezes to government-run grocery stores to government subsidized electricity, just about everything that you can imagine overseen and controlled by the government, how many of these things is he actually going to be able to push through, and how many of these promises are actually realistic? Will New York City change Zoran? I think it remains to be seen, but I think it's indisputable that New York City will be forever changed by the election of Zoran Mamdani as mayor, and I don't think for the better.
All right, Nate Lerner, your thoughts?
I think that both New York and Mamdani will change. From what I've heard, he's already been shown a willingness to work with folks across the aisle on the other side. I believe that New York will change for the better, though. He's made it very clear he's going to build a New York City where regular people are prioritized over the wealthy and big businesses, which is the first time we've ever seen in quite a while a mayor who's going to do that. And I'm excited to see the outcome.
All right, to wrap it up, the quick fire round, that is Owen Alterman, your thoughts?
Zoran Mamdani will change New York City, Ellie. He's already, I think, changed it for American Jews, obviously for Jews in New York, but really for the entire Jewish world, and we'll talk about that, and obviously not for the better. As for the rest of his economic plan, he's going to change New York either way. He's going to change New York if he fails. He's going to change New York if he succeeds. Of course, for a lot of what he does, he can't do it by himself. He needs some help with the state legislature and the governor up in Albany. I'm sure we'll be talking a lot about that, too.
All right, gentlemen. So from this point onwards, feel free to interact. Mamdani campaigned on this. You get a car. We all get a car type of a campaign. But now he's in office, and he's going to learn what everyone's learning as they grow up. It's not fun to be a grown-up, especially not in office. So how can he transform from campaigning to governing? Nate?
Yeah, well, that's not accurate to say that he campaigned on everyone gets a car. He campaigned on very practical, reasonable reforms. Free buses. Oh wow, what an outrage. That's hardly socialism. A rent freeze is pretty reasonable. I pay far too much in rent, as do most New Yorkers, and would gladly welcome a rent freeze. And if you actually look at what he's proposing, they are very easily paid for by very small increases on the most wealthy New Yorkers in their taxes. We're talking about a couple percentage points here. So this isn't, some massive, expensive government program where the government's taking over everything. It's a small incremental change towards helping regular people.
Brendan Straka, just in tiny details, a few percentages. That's what it's all about.
Well, I want to ask Nate a question, because he just said something that really interests me from a lot of Zoran Mamdani supporters. He said that's hardly socialism. Now, I spent the last 6 months running around New York City doing events, rallies, live debates, and debating Zoran Mamdani supporters and interacting with New Yorkers who support Zoran Mamdani. And there's this really fascinating thing that I've heard where there's sort of this denialism that he's a socialist, which I find fascinating, because he's literally an avowed Democrat socialist who seems to be very proud of his socialist background.
Not the same thing as he's a democratic socialist. That's not the same thing as being a socialist.
Okay, great.
It literally is in the name. He's a democratic socialist.
Explain to us what the difference is between democratic socialism.
You don't understand the difference between democratic socialism and socialism? Do you know who Bernie Sanders is? Is he a socialist?
Yes.
Bernie Sanders is a socialist. So Bernie Sanders believes in a government. So socialism is where the government controls every single facet of the economy. Can you point to anywhere in the U.S. where there's a city or a politician who's advocating for that?
Socialism means that the government controls the means of production. But my question for you is,
yes, exactly.
Why
so
are you
what policy is he proposing that is going to take that over?
Nate, can I just get my question out? And I would love it if you would just answer my question, which is, he is an avowed socialist. So why are you saying that
Democratic socialist? No, he's a democratic socialist. It's not the same thing. And the fact that you don't understand the difference, it speaks to
I'm giving you the opportunity to explain to us on this program what the difference is.
I just did explain it. A socialist, as you just said, is a elected leader who believes that the government should control the means of production, should control every facet of the economy, A democratic socialist believes that the government should step in and interfere when needed. So, for example, a rent freeze, he's not controlling what the rent is, he's freezing the rent and capping it, is a reasonable step. Free buses, that's a reasonable step towards the government getting involved to help regular people. That's democratic socialism. Socialism is not that.
So Nate, is Zoran Mamdani on video, on record, saying that we need to seize the means of production? Is that, because I've seen that. Are you denying that?
Sure, I'm sure he has said that in the past and has those views. But he's
and is he also
at any rate, Ellie and to our guests, look, we can argue about this all night long, whether he's a socialist or a democratic socialist. Look at the policies. Start first of all with capping rent stabilization. Look, I remember my economics 101 class in college. We literally learned about rent control in New York as a failure in terms of intervening in the free market because it stopped landlords from having the incentive to invest in their properties and led to all sorts of problems. Obviously, it's popular in pockets of New York, right? Both rent control and rent stabilization, which is related because people obviously benefit from it, but it has its problems. Look, as for free buses, there's an obvious upside. Of course, the question is how and whether Zoran Mamdani can pay for it. In order to pay for it, he's going to need help from Albany, from the state legislature, from the governor. That's not guaranteed, even if the policies are popular in large parts of the Democratic coalition. It's not automatic that he's going to get the green light from there. And there, too, whether these policies will work and how they'll be paid for. So, look, again, we can discuss whether he's a democratic socialist or a socialist, but I think the better way of looking at this is, are his policies going to work, and how is he going to pay for them, and are the costs going to outweigh the benefits?
Well, that's important to to explore. Yeah. Well, it's important to explore, and we should, but I also think that we need to establish a baseline of the denialism about him being a socialist, but that's fine. We can focus on policy as well. I mean, you said you feel like there's an obvious benefit to free buses. I'm failing to see it because there's one very obvious thing that sticks here, which is, if anyone is allowed to get on the bus for free, how do you ever tell someone that they have to get off of the bus?
Where do you live in the city? Where do you live in the city?
What we're going to have all over New York City are rolling homeless shelters and rolling mental asylums.
That would seem to be a relatively easy problem
to be able to tell anyone that they're not allowed to get on the bus.
Of what constitutes reasonable use of the buses. I don't see that as a deal breaker here. Obviously, it's something to be paying attention to as this program gets rolled out. Doesn't seem to me to be a deal breaker. But obviously, look, there are some really big line items here. I mean, obviously, the line item to have free childcare across the city and without having an income limit for it. So even people who can afford the childcare are going to be getting it. That's getting criticism from some economists. So, I mean, there are obviously arguments to be made against the policies as well.
But gentlemen, you all point out and rightfully so, the nits and bits of the different policies. But I suspect that the bigger issue here is what is an ideal New York going to look like? And for Mamdani, it is a profoundly different ideal New York than the one that has been proposed so far. Nate.
Well, I think, again, like what you're arguing for are things that other countries, other places do. Free childcare, free public transportation, control on the cost of rent so it's not out of control. I mean, you talk about how this dystopian situation where rent has been frozen temporarily. Well, what's the alternative? Because New York City currently is one of the most expensive cities to live in. I currently live here. I currently pay far too much for my apartment. My rent goes up every single year and has not stopped. And we have been waiting and waiting and waiting for developers and landlords to solve this problem, and they have not. So Mamdani's saying, I'm going to build affordable housing, I'm going to cap the rent, and I'm going to invest in ways to help regular New Yorkers afford to live here, which is going to create a better city for all of us.
Well, this is really the inside baseball of it, but the impact is, crossing the municipal borders of New York City. But it seems that the first standoff, at least, is going to be over immigration, or as Trump says it, so it begins, right? This is what he wrote on Truth Social. But I do want to ask you, Owen, is it like a Sherlock Moriarty type of a relationship in which one needs the other? Trump needs a Mamdani and Mamdani needs a Trump in order to thrive?
And they both came out winners and are coming out winners, Ellie. We saw that on election night or early election morning here in Israel, right? Zoran Mamdani coming out and saying, turn up the volume. It was the biggest applause line of the entire speech. Then, as you mentioned, Trump following up, of course, with an all caps post on Truth Social. They'll both want to feed off of each other, and they're both the winners. The question, of course, is whether there are losers here. You talked about immigration. Obviously, there's going to be a standoff about ICE agents in the streets of New York, and how Mamdani sees that, how Trump sees that, and how each are going to be playing to their supporters. I do think, and as you mentioned, this is beyond the nitty-gritty of economic policies here. I do think, and we're going to talk about the Jewish angle a little bit later, but independent of that, I do think as someone who lived in the city for 5 years and spent a lot of time walking through and learning about the outer borough ethnic and immigrant neighborhoods, there is something very empowering about Zohran Mamdani helping and reaching out to and feeling as if he's empowering these immigrants who really do work day and night, taking the 7 train in from Queens, working hard, often in the shadows, and really not getting the recognition societally that they deserve. And I think there is something independent of how one feels about his policies or really his far-left ideology, let alone what he thinks and how he seems to relate to the bulk of Jews in New York and to American Jews in general, let alone to Israel. I think there is something really enthralling about the way he's empowering these very, very large populations in New York and about the incredible political achievement about reaching out and connecting to them, Ellie, I would say despite a lot of his policies and despite his far-left ideology.
Brandon.
Well, look, I've said since the very beginning that it's not really a mystery to me why people gravitated towards Zohran Mamdani. The pain points that he's brought up throughout his campaign are very real. The issues are very real. I don't have an issue with, a politician bringing up affordability. Rents are too high in New York City. The cost of groceries are too high in New York City. None of that I have an issue with. And by the way, I'll be the first to admit we had terrible candidates in this election. There was no viable good option in this election. But my point is that giving the government more power and more control and putting the government in a position where they're the one who's going to solve all of your problems, I think is a disastrous solution. We've tried socialism all over the world. What's your solution to fix affordability? It's going to fail in New York City, and it's not going to work.
What is Republican solution then to solving the housing crisis and affordability in New York City? What would a Republican mayor do?
We need we absolutely. I agree with you, Nate, on that. There is no good message coming out. Look, I don't think that the solution to the affordability crisis in New York City is to provide rent freezes and to put the government in more control of housing. We need to provide more housing for people. There's got to be more units. We've got to find a way to bring rent costs down. But we know that when you implement things like rent freezes, what it does is basically disincentivizes landlords to upkeep their apartments. People who are already living in squalor are going to be living in worse conditions. It's going to kill supply. And in fact, it's going to drive rents up for other people who are not in rent-frozen apartments. So it's not a good solution. It's not going to work. We've tried it before. It doesn't work.
I will add here from Israel, from our perspective, we obviously have our own housing issues here that have been an important part of our politics here. We haven't really tried rent control and rent stabilization. The solution that's been looked at here is building more housing. Again, not that Israel has solved all its housing problems by any means. We still have plenty, but the solutions that have been looked at here is building more housing and directing it especially towards young couples and young people.
Well, building more and everything is expensive. I'm not sure if this is the best solution, Nate.
Well, Mamdani does. This is exactly where democratic socialism gets involved. Is there's this notion that let's just let the free market handle this. Well, we've seen what the result is of the free market: rent out of control, affordability out of control. And so, why have a government if they don't step in and get involved when this happens? And so that's exactly what he's doing. He's going to take a firm hand, come in, place a reasonable rent freeze. And then on the flip side, though, yes, Brendan, the concerns you raised are very real. But again, that's why the government gets involved, cracks down on bad actors, gives tax incentives for affordable housing, builds the housing if needed itself. And, really, why have a government if they're not going to step in and get involved in these situations? And are they perfect? Will they make mistakes? Absolutely. But at the same time, we don't have any other options right now. And people are just fed up with the status quo. And so we're trying something new. And I am cautiously optimistic that it's going to work.
And I should also add from Israel's end, also it is, to be fair to Mamdani, he does want to build 200,000 more rent-stabilized units. And again, in Israel, the government has gotten involved in this and hasn't left it entirely up to the private sector, albeit, again, hasn't really worked in through rent controls and rent stabilization, but again, through trying to build more housing. But yes, having the government step in.
But gentlemen, before we take a break and dive in even deeper, the economic issues to an extent, Brendan Stark, I'm not sure if in its analogy, they're the spoonful of sugar or the medicine versus compared to the other elements in Mamdani's policy and ideology. And in this respect, voters who voted for economic reasons, perhaps, again, are able to swallow the other elements in his outlook that are less of a consensus.
Oh, I agree with that completely. In fact, again, I want to go back to the fact that I've spent the last 5-6 months really going around and canvassing New York and talking to people who oppose him and people who support him. And there were a good number of people who I spoke to who supported Mamdani, came out and voted for him, but had deep concerns about a lot of his other issues, from defunding the police to decriminalizing all misdemeanors to a lot of his policy proposals that are not going to work. I think people are very concerned about what this is going to do for crime. I think we're about to get into anti-Semitism. So there are a lot of concerns about him being in office, but I think the thing that drew people out, I've been saying all along, I think what we are seeing in New York City is left-wing populism. It's exactly the reason why people came out and voted for Trump in 2016, but on the far other end of the scale.
Right. So the pendulum is shifting, and we will continue to discuss this and, of course, the big anti-Semitic elephant in the room right after the break. We'll be right back.
You push it, you try to slide it, you even try to hold them shut, but your doors just won't stay closed no matter what. Introducing Ruby Monkey Magnets. Brand new ultra-thin magnetic plates that will keep your doors and drawers shut. And now may be your last chance to get them at a low price. Just peel to reveal the super strong adhesive. Place the monkey, then the magnet, and close. Installation is that simple, and now you have a door that will stay shut. So forget drawers that won't stay closed. Every drawer stays closed. It's so fast and so easy. Even large sliding doors or cordless window blinds. Everything stays closed with Monkey Magnets. The secret is the ultra-strong industrial magnet that's powerful attraction keeps your doors and drawers securely shut. These magnets are so strong they can hold this hammer that's nearly 5 pounds. Plus they're super thin. They'll fit just about anywhere, and they stay out of sight. Even screw them in for a more permanent solution. Monkey Magnets are perfect for cabinets, dresser drawers, sliding closet doors, accordion doors, and more. They're made of ultra-durable metal, so even your outdoor problems are solved in an instant because they're corrosion and rust resistant. Use them anywhere outside the house, even on that stubborn mailbox that won't stay shut. Monkey Magnets can stick anywhere, from drywall to all types of wood frames, metal surfaces, and more. Call or go online now to get 8 sets of Monkey Magnets for only $9.99. Monkey Magnets are guaranteed to last 10 years or your money back. But wait, due to rising costs and supply chain shortages, this may be your last chance to get Monkey Magnets at this low price. There is a strict limit of 1 full house pack per order while supplies last. So order now to keep all your doors and drawers shut tight with Monkey Magnets.
Call 1-800-749-6303. That's 1-800-749-6303. Call or visit getmonkeymagnets.com. So call 1-800-749-6303 now.
This right here is confidence in a bottle. It makes me feel so much more confident than I've ever felt.
They are some of the hottest videos on social media. Those videos claiming to instantly get rid of bags under your eyes. Annette Figueroa is here to tell us why she says this one is for real.
This one is for real, and I'm so excited. We even have a video, and all he uses is a small amount on a clean, dry face. And what it does is it tightens and lifts the appearance of bags underneath your eyes. And I did this to my father. We were at home, so we applied it to his under eye bags, and let me tell you, we were so excited. In under 10 minutes, they visibly disappeared from view, and now it is literally part of both of our daily routines. And not only does it work on the bags, it works on the appearance of crow's feet, fine lines, and wrinkles.
At our $14.95 price, it's the best way to try Plexiderm and see it work after your first application. Call the number on your screen.
Call 800-598-5843.
להתראות בוועידת המפרץ הבינלאומית לאזוריות בשנה הבאה. תודה רבה.
Welcome back to the summit. Still with us, Brandon Straka, Nate Lerner, and our very own Owen Altman. Thank you all for staying with us. Well, it is time to address the elephant in the room. What can we say? It is Jewish. So before we discuss, let's take a listen.
I take the issue of anti-Semitism incredibly seriously. And last night in my speech, I spoke about how my city hall will stand steadfast with Jewish New Yorkers in fighting the scourge of anti-Semitism across the city and making that clear in the actions that we deliver on from January 1st. And I look forward to working with Jewish leaders across this city, whether they be elected officials, whether they be rabbis, whether they be community leaders, to deliver on the promise of not just protecting Jewish New Yorkers, but celebrating and cherishing them in this same city.
All right, gentlemen, another quick fire round, 30 seconds each, and we take it from there. Owen, take the lead.
Talks about celebrating and cherishing Jewish New Yorkers, Ellie, but I think the reality is different. Zoran Mamdani gave an election speech where he talked about Trinidadian line cooks and Senegalese taxi drivers and Ethiopian aunties and a long list of immigrants. And we talked before about how empowering that is, how positive that is. But there was one group that's not on the list. Ellie, we are chopped liver. It's not a cute rhetorical question anymore. It's a declarative sentence. For 130 years, New York has been the beating heart of the Jewish diaspora. But in Zoran Mamdani's New York Jews are in a sense invisible, at least the vast majority of them. They're shifted away from the mainstream. The party is continuing without them. The free bus is moving forward without the Jews on it. And that is very, very sad, with huge ramifications, not only for Jews in New York, but for Jews across the United States, across the Jewish world, and of course, here in Israel.
Nate Lerner, your thoughts?
Yeah, this is honestly, I always think it's insane when people accuse Mamdani of anti-Semitism or of in any way making the city worse for Jewish New Yorkers. What's going to make life better for Jewish New Yorkers is affordable housing and being able to buy food and pay their bills. Simply because he has been critical of Israel for its war crimes and genocide in Gaza, as many Israelis have, and many Israeli leaders have, and many American politicians have, but simply because he's done that and he happens to be a Muslim and a progressive and an outspoken one at that, he is painted as this massive anti-Semite when that is incredibly far from the truth, and it drives me insane to hear this.
Brandon Straka, last but not least.
Well, I don't think he's being criticized because he's a Muslim. I think he's being criticized because he's running for mayor of New York City, and now he's the elected mayor of New York City. And to me, there's a certain irony in all of this, because we all saw the video several weeks ago of Zoran Mamdani crying when he remembered the memory of his aunt, who was a Muslim, and how she felt uncomfortable wearing her hijab on the subway in New York after 9/11. But there doesn't seem to be a lot of understanding of the exact same principle that a lot of New Yorkers are very afraid right now in the rising sort of anti-Semitic culture and climate that's happening in New York City. And I think it's incumbent upon Zoran Mamdani to calm a lot of that energy that's happening. He's been very anti-Israel. He's definitely been on the side of people who are pro-Gaza, pro-Palestine. Yeah. And those are the people who are engaging in the anti-Semitism in New York. So I think Jewish people are right to be concerned.
Ellie, I do want to say this. You heard what I had to say about Zoran Mamdani and what this moment, I think, means to American Jews. Certainly to this one, even after he's made Aliyah and lives here in Israel. But I do think there are some bad arguments being used against him. One is that he's an anti-Semite. I don't think that Zoran Mamdani is an anti-Semite. The other is that he's going to make Jews less physically safe. I don't think that's true either. I believe him when he talks passionately about protecting Jews and increasing the police presence and the funding to take on anti-Semitic crimes. I believe him. I think he was sincere when he condemned the swastika painted on the yeshiva and then morning after his election. But that's not the point. The point is when Zoran Mamdani essentially goes to 1 million Jews in New York, 1 out of every 16 Jews on this planet, and essentially says, if you are willing to distance yourself from Israel, you can feel welcome in my city. And if you don't, you essentially can't. And he talks about celebrating and cherishing, but that's not really what he means when you delve deeper into the way he talks about Jews, about mainstream Jewish organizations, and about mainstream Jewish communities. And in that limited sense, and I want to be clear, in that limited sense, he's really no different from Tucker Carlson in the far right. One last point. Yeah. Another bad argument is that he's a Muslim. Has nothing to do with it. In fact, I actually have some empathy for Muslim Americans, Arab Americans, who feel an affinity to Palestinians. I think it's reasonable. But his positions are extreme, and he's also not reciprocally accommodating of American Jews and their feeling and affinity towards Israel.
Nate, I can see you shaking your head.
Yeah, I think, I mean, you're kind of speaking in like abstract concepts. Like, I don't think you can point specifically to anything that Zoran supports or has done or that will do that is going to harm Jews in the way that you're speaking about. I think it's again, it's just absurd to make this argument.
Brandon, your thoughts?
Well, one piece of this conversation that I think needs to be introduced into the conversation is that we have a problem in this country with left-wing violence and left-wing radicalization. And this has been going on for a long time. I'm not trying to go off course, but I'm making a point here. You know, in 2020, the cause du jour on the left was Black Lives Matter. And we all had to kind of sit back and watch as these people were allowed to go out and burn and loot and destroy stores and beat people up and even kill people in the name of their cause. And this was all just sort of allowed by left-wing politicians and the left-wing media. And that's my concern about Zoran Mamdani. Do I think that Zoran Mamdani hates Jews? No, I don't think that there's any evidence of that. But am I concerned that Zoran Mamdani is going to embolden people who do hate Jews and is going to take a back seat while violence in our city rises and anti-Semitic attitudes rise? Yeah, I'm deeply concerned about that because we've seen that for many, many years from left-wing politicians.
Nate, once again, I can see you shaking your head.
Yeah, so I think let's blame the real cause of the rising anti-Semitism, which is Israel. Like, Israel's actions right now are turning the entire world against them and against Jews. Like, Jews are less safe now because of the actions that Israel has been taking over the last several years. And as a Jew, it's disgusting to see. And I stood with Israel for my entire life. I very much believe Israel has a right to defend itself. But the actions it's taken in Gaza have gone beyond that. And any reasonable human being can see that now and are turning against the country. And as a result, you are seeing a rise in anti-Semitism. Is that right? No, that's incredibly terrible, but it's not Zoran Mamdani's fault. He is not the cause of this. It is Israel's fault and the leaders there who are pursuing this horrific war.
You know, that's an argument that not even Zoran Mamdani is making. He's not blaming the Jews for anti-Semitism. He's saying he's going to go out and fight it. And again, I believe him. But, you know, there was going back to what we were saying before, there was an interview on Morning Joe, and one of his aides was quoted as saying, what more can he do? He goes to all of these synagogues, he reaches out to Jews. What more can he do? And I think the answer is for the 70% of New York Jews who came out and voted against him, the answer is that once you come out and take such a hardline anti-Zionist position and have zero sympathy for the vast majority of American Jews who do continue to feel an affinity for Israel, even if many of them disagree vehemently with policies of the Israeli government, if you refuse to recognize and credit that connection, then yes, there is nothing else you can do.
He can still govern the people he disagrees with politically. It's done all the time. I don't know why it's impossible for Zoran to do it.
But it's not just about affordable housing and buses. Of course, those things are important to Jewish voters and Jewish New Yorkers, I suspect, just like everyone else. But New York has meant something special to Jews in America and Jews around the world. I lived for 5 years in New York. My family came through New York, slept in Central Park in the Panic of 1907, lived in Grand Concourse from the time of Babe Ruth. And of course, I'm part of the vast majority of American Jews who do have those roots. And to see that city elect an anti-Zionist mayor is just something that I think is heartbreaking and meaningful in a way that just goes far beyond politics.
Well, a lot of the Jews here, and in fact, if you look at the makeup of the DSA, the Democratic Socialists in New York, a lot of them are progressive Jews from Brooklyn and Astoria. Like, this is who elected him, who worked to get him, people like myself. And, you know, you look at the Jews in New York, they're very progressive.
30%, according to exit polls, which include, by the way, maybe a third question mark that are Satmar Hasidim, who, of course, have every right to vote in their city, but don't represent wider trends in the Jewish world.
But perhaps the Jews cannot be regarded to as one cohesive group. Brendan Straka, final remarks.
Well, yeah, I just wanted to say, you know, I do think what I found is that for Jewish people under the age of 30, a lot of them were supporting Zoran Mamdani, and a lot of them take a very staunchly anti-Israel attitude. But I don't think that that is representative of the consensus of what the Jewish community feels as a whole. For most Jewish people over the age of 30 in New York City, a lot of them were opposing Zoran Mamdani and find him to be of grave concern. So there is a huge youth push towards this socialist attitude. And a lot of that, I think...
Yeah, the generation.
Yeah, well, and a lot of it stems from, I think, lack of life experience and ignorance, and they're about to learn the hard way.
Or it stems from the outcome of capitalism, which we've been living under.
Yeah, well, there's this old saying that if you're not socialist when you were young, you don't have a heart, and if you're not a capitalist, conservative, right? Yeah. Thank you for that. As you grow older, then you don't have a brain. Well, we're all somewhere in between, I guess. Gentlemen, Nate Lerner, Brandon Straka, Owen Alterman, thank you very much for joining us on tonight's program and for facilitating this important, interesting debate. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for this.
Thank you.
And now we're shifting the spotlight. All right, so from one phrase to another, we all know great minds think alike, right? But how about tiny minds? Do they think alike, or all minds think alike maybe? And your research suggests we're all essentially sharing a brain, or at least goggles-ish. Professor Rafi Malach, a professor from the Department of Brain Science at the Weizmann Institute of Science, thank you very much for joining us tonight on this fascinating research of yours. We all think our brains are those unique snowflakes, right? But this study says we're pretty much on the same page. How does it work?
Okay, thanks for inviting me. Yes, it's something we take for granted, but is actually the basis of our common life, is the fact that we actually see the world in a very similar manner. Now, of course, each one has its own private perspective, but overall, practically speaking, we do share our vision. We do agree on the basic aspects of vision. And this is, of course, the basis of our ability to communicate and to understand each other, and its ability to cooperate and do things together. When we all aim for a table that we are pointing to, we all understand what we are talking about. And also it's the basis of our empathy to each other. And we saw in the last 2 years what horrors can happen when people lose empathy to each other.
So before we jump into the social conclusions, if you will, let's stay on the science side of it. Give us an example. How can we test our similar wiring, so to speak? How can we test if we're seeing something the same way or not?
Yes. So first of all, the very, very simple thing is to show people identical pictures and realize, and as of course we all agree, that they basically name these pictures in very similar manners, and the differences are very subtle. But we went a step forward, and I want to emphasize that this was a collaborative, interdisciplinary endeavor, including Professor Yaakov Hel-Or and Professor Doron Friedman from the Reichman University, led by the students Ofer Lippmann and Shani Grossman for the Max Planck Institute in Germany. Together, we wanted to understand what happens in the brain of people when they see the same images, the same pictures of faces, houses, tools, and so forth. And for that, we used a unique opportunity that is done in clinical patients for diagnostic purposes. The neurosurgeon is implanting probes directly into the visual centers, and the students simply show them similar images to all these patients. And we ask a very simple question: to what extent, or to what can we find in the brain that reacts in a similar manner to these very different, diverse images?
So focusing on the wiring,
It's not more than wiring. The issue, the fundamental puzzle here is that we are all very different. We grow in different ways. Our brains are incredibly complex. So you don't even expect all the brains to react in a similar
Professor
manner.
Malach, I'm now thinking, is this why we all get so amazed by how astrology is just spot on for Aries today, and why AI chats are just seeing through our souls? Because we're that generic?
I will put the astrology on the side, but I will say we do sort of take for granted, we are not amazed enough at the fact that we are all actually able to create the same images when we are faced with the same world object. Now, the interesting discovery is that in fact, our brain react very differently to the same object. What we found is that what really remains the same across individuals is not the activity of the brain that as everybody expected, but the similarities and distances between activations. I'll give you an example. You look at a mountain. A mountain is similar to a hill, but very different than a valley. And these similarities and differences are what keeps our brains reacting in a similar manner across different individuals.
So the differences between us, so merely between a mountain and a hill, no valley inside.
Our ability to tell the similarities and differences is what makes it similar across us.
Our ability to identify differences, this is what makes us similar.
Yes.
I love it. And here you have the social message here. Professor Rafi Malach, thank you very much for joining us. Brilliant.
Bye.
Tiny minds also think alike. Well, ever wondered what's your bot's favorite tune? Well, it's most likely Drake. How do I know? Because rapper RBX is suing Spotify, claiming bots inflated Drake's streams. What does this lawsuit mean for the future of how music is consumed and monetized? Host of the ongoing history of new music, Ellen Cross, joining us live from Toronto. Ellen, what a pleasure to have you back on. So with streaming platforms like Spotify paid on based on numbers, that is, how reliable are these views and streams with bots, inflating any numbers? It's not just Drake.
We're not sure yet. It does seem, though, that the streaming music services do have a problem with something that's been known as streaming fraud. These are various techniques that are used to boost the streaming numbers of particular songs or for particular artists. And once your streams go up, your royalty payments go up. And the way streaming payouts work is that there's a giant pool of money at the end of the month. And what they do is they look at this giant pool of money, which artists had the greatest percentage of that pool of money. Then they write a check for that percentage of that money to that artist. So anytime you inflate numbers, it's very possible that you're getting more money than you actually deserve. Now, the idea of bots listening to music or triggering streams is not new. This has been around for a long time. All the streaming platforms are trying to stamp it out. It is just very suspicious, or at least curious, as to why this seems to be happening allegedly with Drake right now, because Drake tends to be already one of the biggest beneficiaries of streaming music technology.
So here we're speculating. Where does this lawsuit go from here? Because the long-term ramifications for the entire industry, for artists, very substantial, obviously.
Yeah, it's of concern. Now, we should look at this lawsuit and notice that Drake is not being sued. Drake, his name is mentioned 32 times in the lawsuit. But I guess the way it looks is he's being used as a case study, a proof of concept, or somebody that can be used as an example.
Well, look at us talking about it because of Drake.
He frankly doesn't need the help. So it makes me wonder.
Because of all the millions of streams, right?
Right. It does make me wonder if those streams are actually going and credited to Drake. There is another problem where you hijack a stream. And it looks like you're listening to this particular artist, but if you go into the background and follow the stream, follow who posted it and where and how, it's by somebody else that has nothing to do with
the actual. So, we can talk about the changing power dynamics between artists and platforms, because we have seen many artists buying their catalogs out. So definitely a lot of movement there. But when we see artists like Drake topping the charts, can we even compare that to the old school success, like Top of the Pop, so to speak, like the Beatles or Elvis, or once a clear indicators of real success?
I just wrote a column this past weekend where I actually discussed that. People are saying, oh, Taylor Swift is bigger than the Beatles. Well, by what measure? The problem is that back in the old days, chart position was determined by radio play and sales. Now you have all these other metrics, like something called TEAs and SEAs, and in addition to sales and radio airplay, and it's really, really complicated. So you can't compare Taylor Swift to the Beatles, because it's not apples and oranges, it's apples and mushrooms, because things are so different. Charts are the way two things happen. Charts are the way that we can determine exactly who should be getting the money and the royalties, as we've been talking about. And charts are also a way for the music industry to keep score. our artist had this many top 40 singles. Our artist had this many top 10 albums. And at the end of the year, the executives get their bonuses based on chart performance. It's also very good PR. So
at the end of the day, no matter what global capital you go to, what is being played by those vagabonds in the streets, I guess this is perhaps the best indicator for real success, maybe the last one standing. Ellen Cross, thank you so very much for joining us. Thank you. All right, then we've mentioned the Beatles and Elvis, and if you want to feel more like a boomer, the word of the year is not even a word. Yes, what on planet Earth does 6-7 means? Wording, again, we're just going to feel older than we really are. Nicole Tzedek, thank you for coming here and helping us understand, with the lack of a better phrasing, 6-7 what? 67, 6-7, what is that?
That is exactly the point, Ellie.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
It means nothing. And I tell you this in all actuality, the dictionary.com definition of 6-7 means nothing. It's nonsensical. It's meaningless. And that is exactly why they chose it as the word of the year. 6-7, it's like giving a shrug, and you have to do it with these hand gestures. It basically means maybe, I don't know, 6-7. Exactly. And I can tell you, this is a viral term that
is it like
right now.
Mediocre? Is it like in between? Is it?
Ellie, I looked into this to try and give you a good definition. And just as you said, this is the whole purpose. Gen Z, Gen Alpha, this is all about communication to them. This is about being a part of a tribe, a community, having an inside joke. That's how people communicate now, the younger generation. The fact that you and I don't understand this is exactly the point. I can tell you kind of how it came to style, but this is also something that went so viral, we don't even know the true beginning. Dictionary.com that says this is the word of the year doesn't really know how the trend started. Some people say it sounded from a rapper Skrilla's song in 2024, went doot doot 6-7. Some people are looking to viral TikTok videos of basketball players that are 6'7". All of a sudden, now you speak to some of these kids in school, they're blurting it out. Any answer. You ask me, how's my day going? 6-7. What's the temperature? 67, 6-7. It doesn't make sense, Ellie, and it's the word of the year. And I think it truly just indicates what this younger generation, how they are communicating. We've seen these trends for years at this point.
You know, the only thing I can think of is emojis. You know, when they were introduced into our lives, we were all like, what is that? And now there's common understanding of what this or that emoji means. So,
and if you do understand it, then you're part of the inside joke. And if you don't, then you're not going to communicate.
Flamenco dancer, like who would have thought, you know?
All of slang. Also, at the end of the day, I think all of this is slang. This is how language is evolving, how we're communicating, and how the internet also is able to spread this slang.
So the mere determination of what qualifies as a word is becoming more fluid.
That is language in itself.
Wow.
Think about how language started. We didn't used to use words. Now we're using numbers to talk. Who knows what the future will hold? All we can say is 6-7.
6-7. But you know, Nicole, I was just looking at past words of the year. 2023 was rage. 22 was Goblin Core. 21 allyship. 2020 was pandemic. 2019 they. 2018 misinformation. I just cannot help but wonder what 2025 would be.
No one has a crystal ball, and I don't even think we could ever predict that. But it shows all of these words. They're not new words, most of them, correct? 6-7 might be, but not really. It's two numbers, 6-7, allyship, rage. These are words that truly symbolize what came to popularity that year, taking a viral moment that is now a dictionary term. So not even defining it, because sometimes there's no definition to this slang, but trying to put it into context to show what truly brings people together and what people are talking about, the hot topics this year, it seems.
An era of no definition. 6-7 with the shoulder shrug. Now I'm hip, now I'm cool. I doubt that. Nicole Tzedek, thank you very much for bringing us up to speed. This is also a boomery thing to say, right? 6-7.
6-7. Now you're on trend.
Thank you very much, Nicole. All right, before we say goodbye, we all need to take a breather, right? So life can be all doom and gloom if we let it, but it can also be full of unexpected joy. I choose that view. And here's proof. Not Netflix, but Nest flicks. Yeah, high above Melbourne, a pair of Persian falcons turned a skyscraper into the internet's favorite reality show because tens of thousands are watching 24/7 as chicks learn to fly and parents deliver airborne meals, and even falcon startled by an earthquake. All those really true moments are captured live, and it started as a simple nest box back in the 90s. Is now a YouTube hit. Dr. Victor Hurley is streaming it all. The flights, the drama, the baby falcons during their pre-flight warm-ups. 34 stories up, melting our hearts. Sometimes the best stories do not need a script, just a webcam and wild hearts, right? Beautiful. All right, this is it from us for now, but we will see you next week with all the stories you need and want to know. Thank you very much for joining us.